Harbourfront in Toronto, Fletcher's Field in Montreal, Harbourfront in Halifax, and so on. But beyond that, it was clear already that the cities are a global, not a national phenomenon. I suspect that when your mother wanted to shop, she went to Seattle, not to Toronto. I know my wife goes to Seattle and not to Toronto.
No, my mom, she went to the Sears bargain basement in Burnaby.
Well, okay, but I mean, beyond that, our relationships have always been north-south. And that your father documented many times. So, part of the Ministry of Urban Affairs was to do something about Canada's relationship with the cities abroad. That's part of our mandate. It's in the document. And in 68, 69, 70, we began to see what could be done. And the only vehicle was the UN, of course. There's no point in trying to deal with the US and the rest sort of hanging in midstream. So out of this came the first UN conference on the human environment, 1972, Stockholm. I don't know whether you heard about this, a very significant event. At that time, we were lucky enough to place one of Canada's leading managers into the UN system, and that was Maurice Strong. And Maurice Strong went to Stockholm and managed the conference, and we went to Stockholm in 72 and said, all right. At the time, everybody was worried about the whales and the owls and the fish and the rocks and the water and all the good things. And we said, look, that was our policy paper. These elements are neutral. Water is neither good nor bad. There is no pure water in the world. And you know, fish live on each other and they consume each other, and birds eat fish and so on. I mean, it's an interlocking, interdependent system. So if you're really concerned about the degradation of the quality of the environment, water and air and land, you got to deal with the causes, and the cause is the city. So we said in 72, if you're really concerned about the city, as we are, let's have a meeting on the city, not the environment. And the UN agreed to this proposal and said, okay, now you do it. And that was the beginning of the 76 meeting, not on human environment, but on human settlements. That's
held in Vancouver by Jericho.
Well, Jericho's only half.
Yeah.
You see, Jericho was the free-for-all. We're talking about a major international meeting of 140 nations in the QE Theatre. And that was a very important beginning. And now we're going on to, as you know, the World Urban Forum. So that's the lineage.
Did Dad come to be part of Habitat through
Oh
you?
yeah, sure. Oh yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
And,
He had no choice. What was actually most important is at this point, I was back at UBC and I tried to make sure that there would be a legacy, that there would be a continuing involvement in these processes of change and research. And that set up the UBC Center for Human Settlements, which I then ran for 15 years. That was the legacy of Habitat, still there.
were you familiar with the Urban Futures Project and
Yes.
the research that
Yeah.
Father was doing? That
Yeah.
would have been 1976, 75.
Yeah, before I went to Victoria.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was then followed up by the Choosing Our Future follow-up
That's right.
20 years later, and contributed to the Livable Region
That's right.
strategy.
That's right.
Were you involved in any of those things?
Well, do you know the what's his first name? The director, Peter not Peter. Lash, what was his first name? Oh, getting old. Well, GBRD was one modest pearl in a string of many activities. And the only claim that I have is in the string and in our friend Lash, who was then director, who wrote the livable region document. I don't know whether you've seen that, which was financed by the Ministry for Urban Affairs. So we financed that particular exercise. And that then became, a document which we built. But GVRD is one of 4 manifestations of regional planning, which you may not remember. Anyway, 1950, the Lower Mainland Regional Planning Board was established on the presumption that the whole river system from here to Hope had a common future, and that the river basin would be in fact a single developmental unit for geographic and historic reasons. And the Regional Planning Board spent a great deal of time developing a plan, which in fact became an official plan, one of the only official plans in this country, which had power of implementation. And that was between 53 and 58 or 59, another component in this whole change. This is the whole point. I think there's so many things happening that to insulate or isolate one from the other is kind of doing a disservice to all of it. Anyway, out of this came then the regional plan was too powerful an instrument for the province, and they said, no, we're not going to do that again. And they dismantled it and cut the region into 3. Hence, GBRD stops at Langley, which makes no sense at all. And that was the result of that first attempt at really making sense out of the whole geographic region.
So historically, it's been the province that's emasculated the ability to assemble
very much
regional
so.
districts.
And they were always frightened. Look, the power of the city is enormous. To this day, God bless our present premier, he knows how powerful the goddamn city is. And he's always trying to, do what he can to make sure that the province stands first. It's the dynamics. Anyway, I think I've said enough.
I just kept 2 more questions. I've just out of that the agricultural land reserve.
Oh yeah, well, how much time have we got? No, I'm not going to cover this.
Okay.
It makes no sense at all. Terribly important, very much part of the milieu of the day because it happened in 72.
Mm-hmm.
Without this, we would have lost 2/3 of the battle. So in a sense, the Land Commission and that invention by the NDP government of the day under Dave Barrett and Levy and all the others was very crucial. So it's, yes, and they built on the knowledge and the academic material that your father and others had produced at that time. These are not unrelated subjects. Bob Williams, who was the minister of the day, was a student of mine. Bob was amongst the first to get a master's degree in city planning. You can take it from there. So these are not, he was a student of Walter's, obviously, one way or another. So it's all there. So the commission, of course, the one thing that has survived, which is amazing. In fact, 2 things survived. One is the Land Commission, and the other is the insurance company. Nobody has challenged either of them. They've nibbled away and done all kinds of funny things, but in fact, in policy terms, this has survived governments of all stripes in the last 30 years. An amazing achievement.
In winding up, I wondered if you could say a few words specifically about Dad and what you feel that we've touched on it in many different ways, but if there was a seminal moment or something that helps wind it up for you about Walter.
All right. Before I do this, I insist that I want to get a copy of this.
Done.
For good reasons. You'll see in a minute why. Walter and I had many points of contact, many joint enterprises, many separate enterprises. We didn't always agree. We had points of debate, and he came from one side, which was highly intellectual, academic, research-based. I came from action and some degree we obviously complement each other, but we also had our points of difference. But there's one thing very important. When I came back to UBC from Ottawa, and the UN conference had taken place, I was determined to have a legacy, as I explained, which was the Center for Human Settlements. That Center for Human Settlements would not have happened without your father. But this time, he was Deputy Minister of Education. And we both knew what deputy ministers can do. And he was the one who was central to getting a substantial amount of money from Victoria to allow us originally to build on the campus the building to house the Center for Human Settlements. So it was a joint enterprise, federal finance, provincial finance, and to some degree UBC finance, which gave us the building, which housed the center and other things now. But the original support came from the Minister of Education, as it obviously had to, because UBC was part of the educational system. So between Pat McGeer and Walter Hardwick and 2 or 3 others, we had the good fortune of putting our case to them, and they agreed. So Walter and I worked on many things. And the building, which is still there, is part of my heritage.
Well, congratulations to you and to all of you. I'm a little jealous because, you know, I grew up at that time in the late 60s and through the 70s. And I grew up in the age of Trudeau and watched all this change and was sensitive to just that real sense of being able to create a better world. And it's become so jaded in the years since. People don't care the way that they did, or they don't seem to care the way they did at the time.
Well, can you turn that off for a moment? Well,